I think now is a great time to celebrate, as we get into Christmas, of what we've achieved and how far the pendulum has turned in the last 12 months. Right? You've seen President Trump win a magnificent victory in the US. And what you've seen in the US, they've gone from all these athletes going down and taking the knee, which of course they're all now doing the Trump dance. If that's not a great indication of how things have turned around. And remember, he not only won the presidency, he won the Senate majority in the Senate, he won a majority in the House of Representatives, and he also won an overall majority. So far, far beyond what was done. And to see the team that he is now picking is getting involved. Imagine if your kids at school and you're picking your cricket team or who you want this, right? He's standing over, Mr. Musk, you come on my team, right? Vivek, what's his name? Vivek Shrami, right? I want the smartest guy. Can you come on my team, right? Robert Kennedy Jr., you come on my team. That Jay Bhattacharya that he signed up on his team.
Cash Patel.
It goes on and on and on. Tulsi Gabbard. This is going to be a fantastic. We are going to have the greatest 4 years just sitting and watching US politics and watching all these lefties being cleaned out totally. So back here, never forget what we've achieved over the last years or months, right? Remember, during the, people often say, oh, you'd never achieved much fighting the COVID lockdowns. Well, I disagree totally. Remember, Greg Hunt had bought 10 injections for every man, woman and child in the country. They had vaccine certificates and passports in place. And their aim was to force you to have every one of those injections in a clubs like this. It's because we had just enough people standing up and pushing back and fighting. They dropped those. We say like 99% of the mandates are gone. The vaccine passports are gone. Right? There's people have woken up. Are we finally broken through where people understand what a rort this was, what a hoax this was, and how many lies that they were told, and that's woken people up. So we had a great win there. Then we had The Voice. Now remember with The Voice, I remember I did some interview with The Guardian when we were back in government, and I said, look, I might have to campaign against it. And it was like, you're the devil. How dare anyone campaign against it? And I thought, oh, there's no way we can beat this. That's truly what I thought. We haven't got a chance. You've got all the banks, all the big businesses, you've got Qantas, you've got three-quarters of the Liberal Party all in favour of it. How can we possibly beat this? And the first polls that came out, remember, it was like 65-35. It was a 70-30. It was a massive landslide. They all showed that the yes vote was going to win. But slowly, it was we the people, that got out and spoke and debated and had the courage to stand up. It was that courage became contagious. As where one people said, I can actually stand up and I'm going to someone to vote no on this. And that gave a personal, I disagree with this as well. This is a racist provision that you are putting in my constitution. Don't call me racist because you want to put something in my constitution that divides us by race. This is the racist provision. And we turned that around and we won that 64. Then just a little one was the offshore wind turbines down on the south coast. Now some of them went to a couple of rallies down there trying to lobby against that. So they thought it's a safe Labor seat. We can get away with it. We can put them off the south coast. Like just imagine, these things are as high as Centrepoint Tower, right? And they float. They float on a pontoon, which is secured to the seabed with giant steel cables, right? And the sea there is like 1 kilometre deep. And this is in the middle of a whale migration zone. The whole thing was like, and this has never been done anywhere else in the world. Where you see these offshore wind turbines around the world, they're all embedded to the sea floor at about 60 metres of depth. The water's off Wollongong there is 1 kilometre deep going to 2 kilometres deep. So we protested against it, and Chris Bowen was down there and he stood up and he did an interview and he said, he says, offshore wind is constant power. His own studies show that it worked at about, the offshore wind turbines there at 2 k's out to sea, worked at about, 10 k's or 20 k's out to sea, I think, worked at about 30% capacity, and he said there's times you have the doldrums out there. The bloke just doesn't know, he's completely out of his depth. But luckily, because he's out of his depth, he thought, I'll give some concession to these protesters to make the local members happy. And he moved it back, I think it was from 10 kilometres to 20 kilometres offshore. And what that did, that pushed it into such deep water, the whole thing eventually became economically unviable, and all the people that want to do it are pulled out, so that's now dead. So that was it. Then there was the mis and disinformation bill. What a victory. What an against the odds victory. Remember, this was a Liberal Party policy at the last election. The Liberal Party had it, still on Paul Fletcher's website. And he says, we're going to give ACPA all these new powers to monitor mis and disinformation, and basically exactly what Labor did. It was on the Liberal Party's website. So what chance did we have of beating when the Liberals are for it, and you've got the Labor Party for it, and of course you've got the Teals, and the Teals all voted for it, of course. It was remarkable, and yet we lobbied and we campaigned and we ran that protest. I know many of you might have come in the protest. We did it in a Speaker's Corner, and we set fire to the bill and we scattered its ashes, right? And it was one person talking to another person, and people looked at it and said, hang on a minute. Yes, I don't like mis and disinformation, but we're going to make the government the arbiter of truth that can decide. And then you look at their track record versus COVID, and they lied about everything. Everything they got that was wrong, and the people that they silenced and labelled as misinformation were people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, which is now in charge of, National Health in the US, right? And Robert Kennedy. These people were all censored. They're now running the show in the US. So it shows that people woke up to that. And then I thought, then the Liberals changed their position on it. I thought, we had to get, there were 6 independent senators, and we had to get 4 of them of the 6 to win. I thought, it's going to be impossible. People started an email. And the real true beauty of this, there was no centralised committee sitting down working out, this is what we're going to do and these are the tactics we're going to do. It was just individual groups and people and all over the country. They did those people like Rushgan and Arby and so many, and Topher, and so many just people all doing it their own thing. There was Pauline and Malcolm in Queensland doing things, the Libertarians here in New South Wales. Everyone was just doing something independently and different. And that was the beauty of the success. There was no centralised committee waiting for decisions. Everyone just did it and bang. And it worked, and we turned them around one at a time. It was only about Thursday week, we knew we had enough senators to win it. And of course, we did. We defeated that bill. Fantastic effort. And I'd say, just as important as beating the bill was the fact that it's invigorated people and it's woken people up that you can make a difference. Right? Remember the saying, it's one of my favourite political sayings from Margaret Mead. I think it's, if I can paraphrase it correctly, it's never forget that a small group of dedicated, committed citizens can change the world. For indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's what people now believe. People now believe if I get in, I can make a difference. And that is the most important thing. Yes, now we come to the one thing we've got to keep fighting on. This under 16 social media age verification bill, right? I said from the outset that this was a Trojan horse, right? And just think about the way they've rushed this through, right? Well, we're going to have a Senate inquiry. You've got 24 hours to make a submission, right? That's a joke. That is a farce. That is an affront to democracy. Then they rushed it through the House of Representatives on Tuesday, and today they're trying to rush it through the Senate without proper debate, without proper scrutiny, because they know that if people thought about this and had time to think about it, yes, we want to protect the children, right? But when you think about all the unintended consequences, they are worse than the evil that they are trying to protect from. And if you want one doubt, I know many of you have seen it, Jared Rennick did an interview with a couple of bureaucrats from ACMA the other day. And I'll just bring this up. There's a clause in the explanatory memorandum of the bill that says this, I'll quote this, I'm directing it, it says, in addition to age assurance, now they told us it was only about age assurance, so the explanatory memorandum says, in addition to age assurance, compliance with the minimum age obligation is also likely to require platforms to implement systems and procedures to monitor and to respond to age-restricted users circumventing age assurance. So they've got another scheme up. They want to monitor everyone. And now these bureaucrats ask, what about VPNs? Which are virtual private networks, which you do put that on so you don't disclose, you do that for privacy, you're not showing where you are. And they said, these bureaucrats' answer was, well, they'll have to be monitored and surveilled to comply with the legislation. Because Australians, right? And they said, so that we will expect that there'll be a global surveillance of the VPNs, and if you post on something like, oh, I'm at Bondi Beach, or I went to the Bulldogs Roosters game, or they'll look at the geotag on your photos and it shows that you're in Australia, you will then be required to be brought into this system and have to show up some digital ID. So it's about, so this is what these, just imagine these groups, this is what they're thinking up. They're scheming behind the scenes about how they can give themselves more power. It is a complete, so look, it's going to pass the Senate, but I think this is a real fork in the road for the Liberal Party. Many people, I know the Libertarians have come out and they said, that's right, Elvis, the Libertarians have come out and they said starting today, I think today, is that right? They're going to offer, if it passes, they're going to offer free membership for Liberal Party members to change their membership over to the Libertarians. So this will be a real test. Australians have had enough. We've woken up. We're not going to cop this bullshit anymore. The tide has turned completely, and we're going to have a great Christmas, and we're going to have a great next couple of years, and we're going to go from win to win to win. So thanks very much.
Good evening, Craig and Councillor Zara, other local government representatives here this evening, ladies and gentlemen. That introduction just reminds me I've been around too long and done too many things. But you do pick up a few lessons along the way. And the thing that I find most striking in politics at the moment is just how much it's changed. You know, it's frightening for Anne to mention 1987 because it just seems a different world of political activity. And now, all these years later, so much uncertainty, so much change, so much confusion. And that's probably the main feedback I get as a public representative. Where have all these changes come from? What do they mean? What do they mean for my family, for the future of the country, for the global situation? And people have developed a whole range of theories, some of them very simple theories, some of them very complex theories, and inevitably, as always, the truth is somewhere in between. But there are some markers out there in trying to get an understanding of what's happened to politics. And in this regard, you've got to love Donald Trump, and you've got to love even more the fact you can sit there and watch some mentally deranged people on the media, mainstream media, what he calls the fake news, tell us that if you vote for Donald Trump, you're voting for Adolf Hitler. Now, American people did. They voted for Trump, but we were told by all the mainstream media, these people who are paid to be expert, these people who line their pockets and puff themselves up on TV, that Trump said something nasty about a woman once. You had a comedian who said that Puerto Rico was a shithole, which undoubtedly it is. He said some other things that they didn't like, or he had a quip for someone aside, or he didn't look the right way, he didn't sound the right way, or one of his kids said something. I mean, the list of Trump's derangement syndrome was unlimited. If you watch CNN or the Australian media, the journalists we send over there are probably the worst of the lot. Because if you listen to them on Channel 7, Channel 9, even worse, the ABC, you'd be thinking, oh, Donald Trump, poor Donald Trump, he's going to get about 3 or 4 votes in a country of 300 million. You know, like, he's obviously this lost dramatically, hopelessly, he's got absolutely no chance at all. And then, of course, the great joy of turning on election night, and he wins. So you can only wonder how these people hold their jobs, at the height they've got to turn up the next day and collect their paycheck and basically start to run through the whole Trump derangement syndrome now that he's in, and the bad things that Adolf Hitler's going to do to America. So they don't change and they don't learn any lessons, but it's a compelling story of how the media now is completely unreliable. They see various social media forums as a threat to them, as it should be, and how more and more citizens are understanding these people are so hopelessly and consistently wrong, I can only watch them now for entertainment. You can only watch the news for a joke, for a laugh, and to think, how can people so stupid be paid so much and keep their jobs? So that is one lesson, but at the core of it, how does Trump get these votes? When you think he's only going to get 2 or 3, listening to all the mainstream media, how does he win? How did he beat Hillary Clinton 8 years ago? How did he beat Kamala Harris this time? And the story really is no different, because the Democrats, along with the Australian left and left-wing causes right around the world, are fundamentally weak. In America, there's a cost of living crisis, as there is in Australia. They overinflated the economy post-COVID. Interest rates and inflation went up. And there were reports out of the United States of people, working class people in the Midwest of America, who had their grocery bill double within 4 years. Their grocery bill doubled within 4 years. So Trump was talking about that. He was talking about the economy. He was talking about border protection, making sure illegals don't come in to your country. In Springfield, Ohio, where they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the cats. Now, whether or not they were, again, that's another reason he was only get 2 or 3 votes, because he said those things. So the Trump derangement syndrome is incredible, but you have to be part of the left-wing elites to see it that way, that they see Trump's picture and see Adolf Hitler. Normal Americans, normal people, saw Donald Trump's picture and heard his words and thought, he's going to do something about my grocery bill. He's going to do something about my jobs. He's got a plan for combating cheap imports from China. He's going to do something to keep my family safer and my pets, my dogs and cats won't get by these people coming over the border. He's got a plan to address the things that worry me. Because you haven't got much money, you haven't got much power, you're living in a normal suburb, a normal family. You'd be petrified, wouldn't you, that your grocery bills have doubled within 4 years. That illegal migrants are coming in and causing crime. That your children are in lousy schools being taught about gender fluidity and all these other ridiculous things that'll never get them a job. And what's more, the jobs are disappearing anyway because of deindustrialisation in many parts of the United States. So whether you think Trump is a political genius or Trump's got all the answers, at least he was talking about the things that your average American working family was worried about. What was Kamala Harris talking about? She was talking about, well, she's talking about abortion, but she's talking about, well, that's not right. She's talking about identity politics. Something very, very weird happened to the party that I used to belong to, the one that Steve belonged to, the Australian Labor Party, and comparable parties right around the world, the British Labor Party, the American Democrats. Something very, very strange happened to them probably 25, 30 years ago. They started to think that skin colour and gender and sexuality were more important than working people having a job, working people being able to pay their bills, working people being able to own a home, working people having confidence when they send their children to school, they'll get a good solid education in the basics. Something strange happened. There was someone pulled the plug out, or someone tainted the water, where all of a sudden the Labor Party and Democrats and parties like them have thought that identity politics, things that you can't really change, are going to be more important than these basic working class concerns. So now in the United States, in the Trump election, overwhelmingly working people vote Republican. If you said that 30 years ago, you would lock me up as being deranged. But working people vote Republican. The elites, more university educated, theoretical, abstract, think they know everything about the world and want to control everyone else's life. If they like something, everyone else has got to do it. If they dislike something, nobody can do it. That's their worldview. They vote for the Democrats, and very few working people. And you're getting this sort of crossover, I call it crossover politics in Australia as well, where you can see in the battle between Dutton and Albanese, I know Dutton's not perfect, but I think more working people are going to vote Liberal at the next election than for the Labor Party. And we're going to have this American effect. We are a very different electorate to the United States, but this problem of identity politics on the left, where they use it as a mechanism for dividing society, dividing white people against black, men versus women, straights versus gays, and on it goes. This divisive identity politics is being rejected by working people. So there's a big lesson there. If you want to be successful in politics and attract votes, address the core issues like doubling grocery prices, energy insecurity, energy prices going through the roof, the problems in the school system, the problems with community safety, and don't worry about the things that your average person doesn't think about. Now, I've been around for a while and read out the list. It's a long list of political involvement. I've never ever met anyone who tells me the first thing I do in the morning is wake up and think, I'm a white person, or I'm a black person, or I'm male, or I'm female, Or I wake up in the morning and think, I'm straight or I'm gay. Do you know anyone who thinks that way, who says that to themselves first thing in the morning? No. People wake up and think, oh, I've got to go to work today. I'm a worker. Or I've got kids, I've got to get them off to school. I've got bills to pay. Or later on today, I'll take the kids to sport and I'll be involved in a community activity. That's how people identify. Don't talk about identity politics. The identity of your normal person is as a worker, as an educator, as a parent, as a community contributor. They're the things that people are, as a homeowner, an ambitious homeowner for the future. So they're the things that people actually think about. So this left-wing identity politics that's infected Labor and other parties has got them way off into a parallel universe that your average voter is no longer relating to. Now, why did they do it? Well, the left got rich. You see, if you come from a privileged background, you've got a lot of money, which is the story now of your average Labor politician. No more Ben Chifley's, a train driver. These are people who come from they can afford, $4 million home on the Central Coast. And on it goes, you know. The fake story of public housing you had. The truth about Albanese, he had an uncle who ran a printing business over at Botany. The uncle died and he got the inheritance. So the stupid media, of course, wanted to believe the log cabin story there at Camperdown in public housing, and he spun it out for as long as he could. But then when he bought the place on the cliff top there at the Central Coast, it blew it all away. But anyway, once the left gets rich, and most of them are rich and privileged, talk it was an elite, they know better than us, they sneer down their nose at people who haven't got an education, work with their hands, people who are practical. These elites had to find a new way to talk about their own disadvantage. You see, you can't be part of the left unless you can say, I've got a problem, I've got a disadvantage, I've got an injustice that government's supposed to fix. So they invented the idea that women were all discriminated against. There's major workforce components now where overwhelmingly it's a feminine occupation. 80% of the women coming through the legal system in our university, 80% of the people becoming lawyers out of university are female. So to GP doctors are predominantly female now, dentists, vets, office managers, very highly paid professions are more female than male. But gender politics presents the idea that every woman is inherently disadvantaged, the patriarchy runs them. I talk to women who basically say at work, you want to find out who's holding me back, who's causing me a disadvantage, it's normally another woman. It's normally another woman, not a man. So gender politics is a way of pretending that affluent, privileged, left-wing women like Penny Wong, for example. Let's hold Penny Wong up as an example of what I'm talking about. Female, Asian, and homosexual. She would say each of those identities has made her massively disadvantaged in life. Poor Penny. We're all supposed to say Penny was disadvantaged. Penny's been badly treated. Penny's been so badly treated, she's now the Australian Foreign Minister and Leader of the Government in the Senate, travelling the world and living the life of Riley. I mean, these things are a nonsense, but in her own identity and her own projection of who she is in left-wing politics, she's got to say there's something about her that's been disadvantaged. So that's what identity politics does for them. That's the disconnect that they've arrived at. And if you just sort of think, well, the good Australian attitude, I just treat people as I find them. The attitude used to be, I look through skin colour. I'm not particularly interested in someone's skin colour. I'm not interested in gender. I'm not particularly interested in sexuality. I'm interested in their values. They work hard. They don't cause crime problems. They're good contributors in our society. As Steve said, they pay their taxes. They pay their rents. They're traditional owners of this land. And if they do that, well, they're good people. So traditionally, the left look through all these identities that we talk about. Martin Luther King said, I don't want my children to be judged by their skin colour. Well, now the left just judge everyone by their skin colour. And Kamala Harris, people were supposed to vote for her because she's got darker skin. She had, I think, a Jamaican father, an Indian mother, and she's female, and all these things meant you had to vote for her, even though basically to listen to her, she was a dill. You know, she really had very little to offer. Donald Trump, for all his faults, had off Hitlers out there talking to working people about their concerns, how they pay their bills, how they keep their job, how they educate their children. And Kamala's saying you vote for me because of my skin colour and my gender. Well, why would you do that? Why would you? It doesn't matter what she really is. I'm just saying, okay. And my favourite moment in that campaign was when Barack Obama, himself a beneficiary of identity politics, lectured the black American men to say, don't you be misogynist. You probably had enough black women in your life and you don't want to vote for this one. Don't be like that, you've got to vote for them. So, you know, these things are sort of starting to eat themselves alive, aren't they? They're disappearing up their own orifice. When that happens, when Obama lectures black men, you can't be against the black woman. And then after the election was over, you watch CNN and that other mad outfit, MSNBC, where they said, oh, the problem here is the Latinos are racist, they couldn't vote for a black woman. The Latinos are racist, the men are misogynists and all of that. So identity politics is now eating itself alive, which is great entertainment and we all enjoy it. But the main thing is, and use humour against it. Humour is one of the great ways of putting your opponents in their place. But the main thing is, don't ever practice identity politics. Stick to the basics of the things that Trump, for all his faults and controversies and whatnot, stuck to in the American election, and that's how he prevailed. So this crossover politics is very real, and at the same time we do have the influence of social media. The great David Bowie, not just the wonderful musician, said about 35 years ago that probably the internet is not going to be a new era of knowledge and enlightenment. You know, we used to talk the information superhighway. Nobody talks about that anymore. Probably the internet will lead to, in politics, people getting into their own echo chamber and people being successful by telling others what they want to hear. And we do get that. There's probably 5 or 6 different distinctive groups now in social media, and as a result, we don't get any evidence-based policy analysis. You don't hear politicians talking these days in terms of evidence and analysis and the policies that actually work. And climate change, of course, is the classic example. This is the Greens and the Labor left, like Chris Bowen, living their world through ideology rather than reality. Because no one in their right mind would turn off the old, reliable, dependable, affordable power system until you actually had the new one up running, 100% capability. And the fact that on a day like this, a pretty warm but a fairly normal late November day in Sydney, you've got the Premier of New South Wales saying, don't turn on your washing machine, put your dirty clothes on instead. Don't use your air conditioner, to have a sleepless night instead. Don't put on your washing machine, wash your dishes by hand in the dog water. Or do all of that, just so we can keep the power up to people in New South Wales. We used to be a sophisticated, advanced, civilised society.
Used to be.
Now we're starting to live like savages. We can't use our technologies and our household appliances because these galahs haven't worked out that you need a whole new system to be built and only turn off the old system when the new one is up running 100% functional. And the cost of it is extraordinary. Net zero is one of the greatest cons ever in the history of politics.
That's right.
One of the greatest cons. Kevin Rudd started it, and every politician, pretty well Labor and Liberal ever since, has been telling us about the virtues of net zero, the fallacy that Australia can save the planet. We've got 1.2% of carbon emissions. Even the former chief scientist Alan Finkel said that Australia can't have any impact on global climate. We can't have any impact and disappear our emissions overnight. We still won't have any impact on climate. But they've been telling us we can save the planet at no cost. The fallacy was, decade after decade, all these things would change and no one would pay for it. That was the great lie of Australian politics for 20 years. And now, of course, we know the costs are astronomical. To build the new electricity grid, to have your solar and wind farms in the west of New South Wales, an enormous cost to build whole new transmission wires out to the west instead of the reliable system along the east coast where the transmission wires were already built. The huge cost of subsidies to the renewable energy rent seekers and the backup power. That's the thing that has mins with these ridiculous orders about washing machines and air conditioning and household appliances, the dishwashing and so forth. They haven't worked out. I mean, you didn't have to be Einstein to know this. Haven't worked out that when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, their renewables aren't working. And to build the backup power, especially during a wind drought, is enormously expensive. And it's not the sort of thing where, oh, geez, it's a cloudy day and there's no wind in the middle of winter. What are we going to switch on? These are big, expensive systems that need to be in place. And the cost of it is enormous, and it's not really working in New South Wales or mainland Australia. The thing overseas that they use as backup very often is hydro. But we live on the flattest, driest continent on Earth. And other than Tasmania, hydro doesn't work. And where they have tried hydro, it's snowing 2.0, Malcolm Turnbull's baby. It's an absolute disaster. It's the greatest white elephant in the history of Australian infrastructure. They've got their boring machine stuck in the slush. It's hugely expensive, and basically for the cost of tens of billions of dollars, may never be operational. So pumped hydro is not a goer. They don't like gas. They don't like gas peaking plants, which you can turn on and off pretty quickly as a logical backup power system. And they talk about community batteries. Penny Sharp, the energy minister in the upper house, talks about community batteries. I have a meeting with some of her advisors. I said, you're banging on about community batteries as a saviour. Can you tell me how many we've got in New South Wales? How many community batteries do you think we've got in our state?
None.
No, we've got 5. We've got 5 in all of New South Wales with 7.5 million people, 8 million people. We've got 5 community batteries. So where's the backup power? When the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, what have they got? The only logical thing you can do, and ideologically they reject this as well, is nuclear. Australia is the obvious nuclear power for electricity generation. We're geologically stable, we've got the stuff in the ground, we send it to India so they can make electricity and have manufacturing to take jobs from us. It's an economic policy of self-harm. And the advanced nuclear technology now is eminently safe. So we desperately need nuclear as the backup power, probably the only one that's going to work in Australia. So it's just one example of where the policies are no longer evidence-based. They are ideologically based. People living in an ideological world instead of the real world that most of us inhabit. The school system is the same also. Why are Australian school results falling like a lead zeppelin? Why are they going through the floor? The reality is that schools all over the world have been studied inside out. We know exactly what works in the classroom. Direct instruction teaching. We know that phonics work a lot better than whole word in literacy. There are behavioural and discipline practices that work, but they're not implemented because the Teachers Federation doesn't like them, and the Teachers Federation in New South Wales has run education policy for 40 years. So my message tonight is pretty clear. Don't engage in identity politics. Stick to the fundamentals of what actually worries people in their cost of living, home ownership, jobs, the education of their children. And when you do have a look at those policy areas, such as climate change, energy, schools policy, look at the evidence, look at all the studies that have been presented and come up with realistic, practical policies that actually address the problems. And then, if you've got the flamboyance and the money of a Donald Trump, you too can be President of the United States or on your local council or run for Parliament and do wonderful things based on that policy platform. So our challenge in Australia is, of course, that we're very different to the United States and these other countries where there's been crossover politics. The United States, I suppose, from the American Revolution, has had a bigger tradition of electing the rebel, of citizen rebellion, and Trump is a sign of citizen rebellion. In Australia, we've had larrikinism, that's fading as the political correctness wipe out anyone with a sense of humour. And Australian rebelliousness, unfortunately, as we saw in the COVID period, people were too readily pushed by government to follow government orders. Australian rebelliousness is kind of a low-level thing, where we'll take the piss out of the parking inspector writing a ticket on our car. We'll have a go at him, but we haven't got a plan for overturning the government. That's the level of Australian rebellion, whereas the United States is very different. So it's a big challenge in Australia, but great things can be achieved. I'm happy to talk about them this evening and also answer any questions. Thanks for the invitation to be here, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.